responsibility, that lesson of knowing that you have to fend for people and defend them. This drives me. So we go away and we learn in schools, we learn at universities, but I think the best lessons are the ones learned at home. The culture of effort equals in reward. That came from Terry Telemaque, transferred over to me. And Cecile, it was a home where my mom stayed home and cared for us while my dad went out and did his best, and we were fed, we were cared for. Today I am a man that came from a little tiny house and have learned those values. I appreciate them, and that transfers over to my effort to do the best I can for my family, for my community, and for my country. That's the legacy of Terry Telemaque, and I revere that so much. And he died prematurely, and his death affected me significantly, and wish he could have been here to see his son. But while he may not be standing in front of me, there's a lot of him that is in me, that drives me for country, for community, for family. And that's basically me. Just a simple little guy, yeah, whose father taught him so much.
You are now in Antigua, Darwin, but it's not your first time. After Hurricane Maria, many persons may not be aware that you actually had schooling in Antigua. Can you help us through with that period?
Well, in 1979, I was a young boy back then, little boy. My father, again, had a sister in Antigua, and he picked up my sister, Carol, and I. And sometimes I wonder, because there were quite a few of us, we had a big family, like I said, but he picked me and said that we had to make sure that, yeah, he kept going to school. It was just around getting towards where you needed to go to the common entrance class, the standard, I think the 6th grade or something like that, yeah. And he decided he wasn't going to allow me, after Hurricane David destroyed the whole country and our school, to not have somewhere to go. So I came to Antigua, and the Antigua government educated me for a while, and so they did with my sister Carol. And my aunt, my father's sister, took care of us. And so there has been that exposure and commitment to Antigua that was established then. It was my first time out of my country, Dominica, and I found an interesting place. It was a little difficult. The Antiguan kids were not easy. They gave us a hard time sometimes. It was really tough. They would be following us around and calling us names. Dominica, old fall, go home. And so the adversity was there, but I knew what I went there for. I didn't go there to make friends necessarily. I went there to learn, to be in school. And so what I did is I turned on the part that I knew that I could do well, which was to excel at school. And I did that. And it was almost a drive to prove, yeah, if you're going to fight on the street when you're shouting at me, I'm going to beat you in the classroom. Very competitive aspect of my life that developed all the way back when adversity surrounded me. But I will never, ever, could not ever forget that the Antigua government made that investment in my life. And pretty much that investment from the Antigua government is why I'm here. And I can speak to that a little later.
Now, you came back to Dominica to attend the Dominica Grammar School, I think it was, in that early period. You can also give us a clear indication of you being at the Dominica Grammar School, going through the process of both academics and sports.
Yeah, and Cecil, this was a very interesting moment because at the time when I did common entrance, I did it the year before. I'm sure I did well enough to pass it. They said I didn't, but I don't understand what happened. Anyway, when they sent me over, they had decided to build a St. Andrews High School, and all the students from that area were supposed to go to St. Andrews High School. And I tell you, my father decided I wasn't going to go to St. Andrews High School. Now, one can speak of things in a way that you almost think Providence has some things aligned. But all my friends at that time from that area, Marigot, Woodford Hill, Kalibishi, the Car Reserve, they couldn't come to town anymore because they were told they had to go to school in St. Andrews. But I got somehow through, I don't know what my father did. And I also don't know what drove him to say, you're not going to grammar school, you're going to grammar school. I hope I said it right. You're not going to St. Andrews High School, you're going to grammar school. And I wanted to go to grammar school, Cecil. I wanted to go to grammar school because that's where Lockhart Sebastian had gone. That's where Irvin Shillingford had gone. That's where Norbert Phillip had gone. And if anybody in Wesley remembered me around, they knew the only thing I wanted to do was pick up a bat, pick up a piece of orange, pick up a stone, pick up anything and hit it. Just keep hitting it anywhere, all the time, on the street, in the yard, in the house, anywhere. I wanted to play cricket. That was the only thing on my mind. And so I wanted to go to that school where the guys who had made Dominica proud had gone to. I needed to get there, and somehow my father was able to get me there. And I got in with the intention of playing for grammar school. My brothers, Calvin was a fast bowler, so he thought. My brother Derek, who was a pretty good cricketer as well, he was also a part of helping me to formulate my cricket early on. And now I'm at grammar school, and I'm going to a practice game. I was a very small, tiny little guy, and I got into grammar school, and I am now going to practice in the afternoon. And there was a big guy with a big voice. His name is Roy Marshall. And he was like, where was this boy going, this little boy? And yeah, in about an hour, they realized they probably couldn't get that little boy out. And things changed because the coach then, Ozzy Savary, recognized that at 12 years old, there was a bit of difference in what he saw. He probably was seeing some of the things that he'd seen. He started speaking to me about some of the players who had just been there. Some of them was Vigilant. Forgetting his last name, he was speaking of Tutti Geese and the guys that he had seen just recently. He started referring me to some of what they did, and he selected me to be part of the squad to try to make the grammar school team. And I think Ozzy Savary has been, I think, a major part of my life. He guided me through grammar school, and it was he who picked me, giving my first break at grammar school. And I was still just about 12, 13, which is when I met Tom Lafond and Irvin Shillingford. They had heard about this little boy, and they came to look, and they attached me to a club, Casuals. The last part, it then became Cavaliers, but it was Casuals just in the last few years of it, I think. And I did some games with them. That's how it started. That's really what created an interest around me and my cricket. And Ozzy Savary helped me build my game. He held my hands when I was disappointed that I didn't make the under-19 team, when I was the highest scorer in the under-19 league, and I was the highest scorer in the trials. But I was 15 years old, and they figured, yeah, let's wait. At that time, they were not pushing people forward. And by the next year, Dominica was hosting the tournament at the Windsor Park. And with all my friends at grammar school under that flamboyant tree, flowering with red flowers, it was quite a day when Dominica played Grenada the first game. And myself, Delvin Esprit, Albert Timothy was at grammar school as well. We did very well. And we were selected from there to play for the Windward Islands under-19 team. And I think just from grammar school to Dominica under-19, where Geoff Faustin, Norbert Phillip, Irvin Shillingford, a host of others assisted us. I remember going to the botanical gardens and Umpire Baptiste, Umpire John, and a few of those guys who were there started talking about this little guy and coming around to see him. It was quite interesting that all of them really helped me, held my hand, gave me encouragement, and taught me the virtues that I've since been part of my existence. And from there to win under 19, life has never been the same. I went on from the winners under 19 to meeting so many famous cricketers, including Brian Lara, Jimmy Adams, so many. We went on to play for the West Indies under 19 team after we toured Jamaica and came back home. Went on trials in the botanical gardens for the Windward Islands team. I had not even played for Dominica yet. They brought me on trials at the botanical gardens, and I made the Windward team at that trial. And it was just moving from one step to the next. Little boy from Wesley. Most people figured the countryside could never do things like that. I heard people talking about, if you're not from Roseau, you can't do this and can't do that. So many things people say, lots of which you have to defy and have the drive and courage to understand that your passion and your desire can overcome even the most difficult circumstances. And people end up not trying because they're told so many things by people. But when you have an objective and a goal, no one should ever cause you to walk away from it. Stay focused, keep doing the right things, and life can change.
I'm sure when you listen to stories of great cricketers, and you said that you were in the mix of Brian Lara, what would you have remembered ever in any conversation that Brian Lara would have had with you and maybe some other guys like yourself and Delvin?
Well, I remember being in the Cactus Inn in Trinidad, that's down south, where we were playing the West Indies on the 19 tournament. And we had people like, there were so many people there. Carl Hooper was there, Kenny Benjamin. We had Alvin Morris from Antigua, very good cricketer. We had Jimmy Adams, Roland Holder, Danny Ram, Joseph. We had so many people who played Test cricket, playing at the under 19 level. And I remember being in a room, a big room. Brian and I were 16 years old together, just young boys. And Brian, I'll never forget this. Brian stood up one day and he said, "I'm going to break the world record." I remember just thinking, this little guy, tiny little guy, saying that. And Kenny Benjamin, which was a big fast bowler, big burly guy, walked up to him and slapped him on his head and said a few things to tell him to sit down. And but I'm telling you, man, a few years later, it was very clear that Brian Lara actually did it. To hear someone say something at that young age and to watch them do it. I remember sitting on my couch in St. Thomas. I had gotten some injuries and I was not playing at the time. And I'm sitting down watching this guy do what he said he planned to do so long. And he had tried to break into the West Indies team many times, didn't get in. And now that he was in, he was on a mission to do it. And that also means so much to those of us who had goals and objectives as well. It means you set them, you work hard at them, you can achieve them. And Brian Lara certainly did that and did it very, very, very amazingly and prolifically. And I think he deserved it. And even to consider that he didn't just do it once, he did it twice, just to prove that this is my record. I think if there are young people listening, there's nothing that can stop you if you're dreaming. And it doesn't matter where you came from. If you could see where Brian came from, with a mother living in a tiny little house, with no father around him. I think Brian showed that effort really does equal rewards if you put in the right effort in, and he did. And I'll never forget watching him doing that. That meant a lot, because even if you weren't playing, you still could understand that if you planned and if you orchestrated your life well, you could do things that you wanted to, you could achieve goals that you wanted to. And so that is always something that I keep in the back of my mind. Set goals, achieve them, and continue to work hard, because it's your own drive, your own focus. There are people who will encourage you. There are people who will be around you to give you some words of encouragement, and those who will even try to make you doubt that your mission is worth fighting for. But if it's what you want, the idea is to stick with it. Never.
What would have been the contribution of yourself, Darwin Telemaque, and Delvin Esprit playing for the Windward Island at the time, alongside Brian Lara and people like Hooper and Jimmy Adams?
Well, I think we there's some feedback. But you need some mute my mic.
I'm not so sure if it's not my mic for sure. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a mic open somewhere.
I'm not so sure because not in the studio where I am. There's no mic on at this time. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the one can't doubt that being around Carl Hooper, Jimmy Adams, and all these great players would have influenced you. It wasn't. It was so many. I mean, I went to Australia with the West Indies under-19 team, and I mean, when that team had players like Robert Samuels, who played Test cricket, Roland Holder, who played Test cricket, Jimmy Adams, Ridley Jacobs, Dan Raj, Brian Lara, all of who played Nehemiah Perry, all of who played Test cricket. So out of a 14-man squad, almost 9 or 10 of our team ended up playing Test cricket. So it was a very significant group of players, and they would have influenced us definitely. And I mean, even Delvin Esprit was one that I thought didn't really get a good break. He had 2 good seasons. He had one in Trinidad. He had an excellent one in Jamaica, like I did. The difference with Delvin, though, which is one of the things that players and coaches have to pay attention to, as you look at how you strategize the future of players, you need to look at what they're competing against. At the time, I was an opening batsman, and the openers who were around at that time was Robert Samuels, Stuart Williams. There was 1 or 2 guys from Guyana, and they weren't really doing as well at the time. And so it was myself and Brian Hamilton, who was another very good player, who opened for the Windwards at that time. And we fought well. And I think Delvin did well himself, and almost, I would say, well enough to would have made the West Indies team. But then in the middle, you had Brian Lara, Jimmy Adams, Roland Holder, and I think that may have dealt Delvin a difficult blow there. But he certainly had done well enough to, I think, move on. But they picked myself and Denison Thomas from the Windward Islands. And I remember Irvin Shillingford coming into our room where we were gathered to make that announcement. And those were special words when he called out Denison's name and then my name. It was unbelievable, a very, very special moment. Yeah, so I've been grateful for that ever since.
And you would have played for the Leeward Islands, the Windward Islands senior teams, under the likes of fast bowler from Antigua, Courtney Ambrose.
Well, I played against them. My debut was made in Antigua, and there's the other thing about Antigua as well. So the first time I traveled, I came to Antigua, got schooled there a bit, and now I'm at the first game of my professional cricket career was Antigua at the recreation ground. We're going up against Courtney Ambrose, George Ferris, Anthony Merrick, Eldin Baptiste, and there was one more fast bowler there, I don't remember his name, and put on a good show. My debut game. I just came from making the Windwards team, and now I'm on the Windwards senior team at the age of just making 18, and I scored almost 80 runs that day, and that was signaling, hey, maybe there's a player that you probably should take a look at for the future. So up until that time, things looked well, and then I played a couple of the games and had to go off with the West Indies under-19 team to Australia. But certainly today, when I meet Courtney Ambrose, he tries to ignore the fact that I did give him three fours in 1 over. And he didn't like that at all. Still doesn't like it, but that's something that's it's written in a little scorebook, and that's always something that we laugh about. The other thing that happened, even when we left Antigua, I went down to Grenada playing against Barbados, Malcolm Marshall, Sylvester Clark, Wayne Daniel, and Joe Ghana. And I remember there was an over where Joel Garner pitched it up nicely, and I drove it back for 4, and he wasn't very happy. He came down the pitch and said a few words about being a schoolboy, and he was a big man. The man you heard on.
Tell us exactly what he said.
No, you can't. I can't repeat what he said.
Oh, okay, some swearing words.
But I will tell you though that when you have been listening to Tony Cozier and Henry Blofeld speak about these awesome legends, and you get to be on the other side batting against them, that was a wonderful time. Just an amazing moment in my life. I remember the third game against Trinidad, where Brian introduced me to Gus Logie, and I remember Logie giving me a lovely Gray Nichols dynamic bat and pair of gloves, and he says, "This is for you, and keep that." I remember having that for a long time when I came back home. Special gift. These guys were branded by various manufacturers, and he gave me. I remember all of that. Just meeting these guys was just incredible, and I really thoroughly enjoyed that part of my life.
Now you're back home in Dominica, outside of cricket. You finish your school, working. Where did you start working?
Well, I left Dominica while I was playing cricket, played in England on and off, and I went on to St. Thomas. I stayed there for a while, started working, doing stuff. I started working with my brother, Derek, in a painting company in St. Thomas. And that too was a good lesson that you had to learn to do the right things, to manage time, to manage how you're gonna complete a job on time. A little bit of different aspect of my life. I played cricket in the Leeward Islands League, representing the Virgin Islands at the time then as well, while my brother was still playing. And I did that for a while. Then I ended up getting married. I was married to a young lady and had a son. His name is Nathan, and he's in Florida now. And I moved on from doing that job to do another job to take care of my family, because I remember that's always something that is never missing in my mind. You have to work hard. And Cecile, I remember there was a period when I didn't have any work to do. In life in a foreign land, it gets pretty tough when you don't have something to do and you now have young family that you have to take care of, and it got really hard. I remember having to do some things that were just incredible. I had to take 1 box of macaroni and cook half of it and wait the next day to try to cook the other half with nothing else in it. Just trying to get enough to eat to make it through. And I did that for a number of days. I remember getting a job, and it was a job where they paid only on commissions. So you had no money coming in at all. But I kept working hard every day, going out, trying. It didn't work out for months. It was so hard that I had to walk up and down the street trying to make sales, and my shoe got wither out. I put cardboard inside of it to keep it so that my feet wouldn't burn up on the road. But I never quit, kept going, because the intention was to make a mark to feed my family. And lo and behold, after consistent effort, after plodding away at it, things changed. At about the 3rd month, it became so amazing that the same habits that you learned in cricket, which was to keep practicing, keep doing the right thing, it came through. And here we go again. Something changed and the lights came on and life became so amazingly different. I started making more money than I ever had in my entire life, because I was now doing the right things, working hard and trying to make an ends meet. And it blossomed into something quite special. And I was able to once again start feeding myself, my family, built a home there, and all of that happened in a short space of time. Effort can never, ever be understated. And effort doesn't have to be any special thing. It doesn't have to be just the thing that you always wanted to do. It means effort. Find something and work hard at it. Keep nailing at it, and don't let anyone undermine that part of it, because it happened that time for me again. And I turned out that I became the marketing director for a company called Medical Air Services, and started spreading that company all over the Caribbean, Trinidad to the Bahamas and Kitts Nevis, Antigua, all over from St. Thomas. If anyone knows of Maasai and Medical Air Services, that was us. I was the leading salesperson. And part of your sportsman type attributes is that you never, ever want to quit, and you always want to win. You always want to overcome. And so I was always striving, fighting hard. And I did that with Medical Air Services until I quit after we had a disagreement with the owner. I went on to work for Tropical Shipping in St. Thomas. And there we go again. Effort, stayed in there from 7 in the morning. Sometimes I left work at 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning, learning the computers, learning all of the things in shipping and transport, because I wanted to be the best at it. And in 2 or 3 years, the manager said, you know what, we think, we want to move you up. And I was just about 24, 25 years old when they decided to send me over to St. Kitts to manage that whole island of St. Kitts and Nevis. And I showed up over there, and some people couldn't believe they had actually replaced the grown man they had with this, what they called little boy. But they soon found out that this was not no ordinary little boy. I wanted to win. I wanted to do so well that I fought hard. I destroyed the competitors with effort every day, going into people's businesses, trying to get their business. They would kick me out. I'd show back the next day. They would say no. I'd come back. I'd write them letters. I'd do all sorts of things to try to get the business until we did. And I took the market share from 27% when I arrived up to 85, 90%. Some of the competitors had to leave because I wanted to have it all, because that's just the drive and the feeling that, I wanted to conquer what I was working on. And so from that, Tropical gave me another promotion and another promotion. Then I ended up in West Palm Beach, became a marketing director for the company from there, doing work in all of the Caribbean islands. And continued to learn the industry and the business side. I did, at one point, I had to do some work with various agencies in different parts of the Caribbean. And that worked out okay for a while. And then I decided I wanted to start my own business, and left Tropical, went on my own. And that's when I ended up back in Dominica after my father died, which was one of the most horrific moments of my life. I can't even explain what that was like. At a very young age, 59, my dad just had a heart attack and died. Couldn't understand it, and ended up back in Dominica. And that was a traumatic moment. As a matter of fact, that is the reason why I left Tropical, because I was so busy at Tropical. My father said to me one day, this job is going to do you in. This job, you're traveling too much, you're doing too much. And then when he passed away, I just couldn't do no more. My mind just wasn't there, and I had to do something different. So I came home, and one day I went down to town to sell bananas. And Cecil, that also changed another part of my life too, because when the truck came down with quite a few 100 boxes of bananas, my father had a huge banana farm. I think most people know that. And we came down to the geese boat, and the guys decided that there was one insect in 2 boxes. And at that point, geese had a zero tolerance policy for any infractions that were found at the reception depot. So you couldn't come there with anything bad. And I remember Sabroch looking at me and telling me, Darwin, we have to reject the whole thing. And I couldn't understand how you're going to give someone back all these boxes of bananas. What are we going to do? I mean, we had to pay people. We harvested this thing. And sometimes you think about that. And what happens to a farmer when that happens? There was no recourse. You would have to take them and go throw them away. And I decided there's no way I'm going to do that. But what am I going to do? So I quickly I went back to the guys at DPPL and I said, you guys have to figure out a way, because there's no way that I would have spent all this time, all this money harvesting all these bananas, and you're just going to tell me to throw it away. And they said, well, we can't help you. That's just the rules. And I said, no, we have to find a way. And then Mr. Austri said to me, well, we have a room downstairs. Maybe we could store it there for you. And we stored the bananas there. And I said, what do you do here? They said, we ripe bananas. I said, well, why don't I ripe these? And let me tell you, man, something triggered off in my mind, because from the adversity at the port, we're now in a room with air conditioning. We had a few little canisters that I didn't understand what they were. Mr. Austri showed me a few things, how to put the ethylene into the thing and turn it on and leave it there. And the next 3 days, I had ripe bananas. Didn't know what to do with all that ripe bananas. They were like 500 boxes. Didn't know what to do with them. So I said, okay, well, I have to now find a way to get them sold. So I sat down and came up with a strategy. And my wife, if she's listening, she'll remember this so well, because it was quite something else. I went all to Roseau, and there's something that I think gets in the way of progress is people's impression of what you ought to do to make a living, what you ought to do to excel. It doesn't have to be defined by being a doctor or lawyer or something extremely special. It's about finding something that can create that space that makes living possible, that makes feeding your family and taking care of yourself. But the key thing is to find the right space to put the effort into something that can create something. And you don't wait for it to be something special. You just keep doing what you're doing and making the effort right. So the first thing I did is I decided to sit down and write down, where can I sell these bananas? There were only a few places. I think Mrs. Ferrara was doing some at the time, but she was basically selling to 1 or 2 areas. And I decided I have to find new spaces. So I went to Mr. Jolly. I'll never forget this. I walked into Mr. Jolly's pharmacy because I said to myself, if there's any place that must have bananas, it's a pharmacy. Why? Because I told Mr. Jolly, listen, Mr. Jolly, you are selling drugs to people or pharmaceuticals to people, and I would like to introduce a different type of product in your store. And he said, what is that? I said, bananas. He says, why? I said, because it's a wholesome fruit. It's a natural fruit. People need it. It can make them better. And so he says, well, I don't know. I said, listen, Mr. Jolly, I'll tell you what, I'll leave 1 box there and let's see what happens. And in an hour or so, he called me back. He says, well, the box is finished. Bring another 1 back. And I'll tell you, Oren, if he may not be listening, but he'll remember that story, because in a day he just changed. And I found spaces that no one ever thought they should put bananas at some of the gas stations. I just went out to people, put it at bakeries, put it everywhere. So I had boxes going places, and all of a sudden in Dominica, where bananas were grown, where bananas was very, very prevalent. You could find bananas at the market, you could find it anywhere. But now in Roseau, in Portsmouth, in Point Michel, in all over Maho, different places, I'm putting boxes of bananas in places that no one thought, because I had to create a space to get rid of those bananas so they wouldn't spoil. And boy, I tell you, we sold it off. And the best news was we went from getting $17 a box from geese to now we were getting $35 a box, which just made it even better. So I decided, you know what, I'm not going back to geese with any bananas. I started to harvest my bananas and ripe it, and I started buying from farmers, and we developed a very interesting business. At the time, I didn't even have a proper vehicle. I had a little white car. Yes, and I would load it up in the morning by DBMC, because nothing's going to stop me. I'm not going to say my car is too nice and I'm not going to put it in there. That's what we had, and that's what we loaded up. And I tell you, my wife too, she was so supportive of that, and she kept believing in something that she saw. It was an effort that was just abnormal. I mean, I wanted I had to make this work because I was doing it. I wasn't going to do it halfway. I was going to do it with all the passion I had. And so I had guys planting, I had guys doing, and the stuff was working well. And then one day while doing all of that, one of my friends in Miami said, can you send me some produce? And so I said, okay. I filled up a container, sent it off to him, and we got into another business. And that business went from bananas to coconuts and dasheen, and we started doing stuff. And in the process of that, so many things happened. I mean, there's so many stories that goes around about how difficult it was and how some people figured they weren't treated well or not. But I'll tell you something. in the process of doing something as difficult as that was, it was very difficult. It had ups and downs in it. We tried so hard to always ensure that people could sell what they made. We had to meet standards in the market. It's so hard to get people to understand that two and a half pound dasheen is not a quarter pound. It's not a tenth of a pound. It's not a little tiny thing that can barely fit in your hands. But sometimes we believe you have to pay them for everything. And there's that whole issue of quality control that we don't seem to understand is vital and important. And that got in the way of something that I thought was very unique and special. Couple that with the fact that sometimes when you have product that you can't really test and you don't know how old it is, yes, so some folks have dasheen that extended beyond the proper lifespan or the proper gestation period. And so you mix that with 20,000 pounds, and now the guy who receiving it says, I'm not paying you for that load because I found too many bad pieces in it, and then you lost $80,000. That part is never really understood. I mean, you folks hear that and they don't see and understand the trials that you went through trying to do this. So we lost that. We kept going though, and folks would never understand how difficult that was. And my wife would be sitting there scratching her head, wondering why, but the effort was maintained. We kept doing it. We built a very good business. Tropical Farm Produce became the largest exporter of tropical produce out of Dominica, out of the Windward Islands into the US. And that was something that I was very proud of. It wasn't something that, I studied at university or high school or anything, but it was something that was allowing for so many farmers in my country to get the benefit. They were producing and they were earning. It was a very good thing. Plus, we had 20 people or so employed at the packing plant by Dexia, which every week or every other week, they were there preparing and loading Lulu Bell and all those people there. It was fascinating how an industry just emerged from the simple decision by Sabi and his team on the port to reject my bananas. So in adversity, you can still rise above it. You can still not just accept that you should be knocked down. And we came back strong, came back well, ended up having to leave because things changed, but that's pretty much me in Dominica. It was lots of lessons learned. There are things that I still try to deposit in the space.
But I also know, Darwin, that you also played a role, Mr. Bully also played a role in your life sometime in that process of you going between bananas and understanding what is required in terms of business and trade.
Yes, I think Mr. Colin Bully, made a very interesting introduction while I was doing my banana production. He understood that I had previously done transportation. And so he asked me one day to come into a meeting, which was the OECD meeting with the OECS, the ECCB. They wanted to have a meeting in Dominica, and he asked me to come in to speak to transport. The World Bank was coming to meet them. Mr. Bully invited me. I went there and I sat down with the World Bank guys and I started speaking to them. And I'll tell you, that was a fundamental transformation of my fortunes there, because at that point, the World Bank says, we want to speak to you. And they said, we can't speak to you here. We'd like to speak to you someplace else. So I took them down to my wife's office above Mills Ice Cream Shop. And they came in and we sat down in the little back room, had a discussion, and they signed me up to be a World Bank consultant doing port modernization work. And I had to travel to quite a few different countries to do port modernization work. And that was where things changed. So Mr. Bully, and not only did he create that opportunity for me, but then I started advising different groups at the CARICOM level. I worked on the national export strategy with Lucilla Lewis out of Scott's Head. They used to own Sharrott's Garden. And she too was critical in where I am right now in Antigua. She played a significant role in that because she was the consultant that the World Bank actually engaged to engage me fully So Mr. Bully did the introduction. Lucilla worked on it. Two Dominican people that I owe a lot to, a significant amount to, grateful for them. They introduced me to the World Bank. One day, the World Bank said, we're going to Antigua. And so folks, you can't even write this script. So the first time Hurricane David, second time my debut on cricket. Now the third time I'm in Antigua doing port evaluation. I went into the port and I found some very challenging situations and started advising them on how they could address them and fix them and all that stuff. Went back again. We went to other places, came back to Antigua. And then the minister, Harold Lovell, who was then the Minister of Finance, started asking the bank, I didn't even know he was doing that they wanted to have that guy, that black guy who came with you, or they want him to come back to help them at the port. And they kept asking and asking and asking. And then the bank kept telling them, we do not send consultants into anywhere beyond 3 years. So they shut it down. And I remember one day, Laza came to me and he says, you know what, Antigua's been asking for you for so long. Laza was the main leader of the group. He says, the Antigua has been asking for you, so we're just going to ask you. And so you can tell us. They were expecting me to say no. But when they asked me to go help Antigua, there was no question. I had to go.
So you were so you were in Dominica at that time?
Yes, I was in and out of Dominica, but living in Dominica at the time. Yes. And I told him, yes, I will go. They said, no, we like you here. And I said, no, I want to go. I'm going to go. And I sat down with my wife and we discussed it. And yeah, so I'm in Antigua.
Sorry, Darwin. I also know that at the time, Minister Henderson was Minister of Agriculture, because he's a guy who likes you a lot, would speak about you quite a lot. As I really don't know why. So you can really help us to have an understanding as to why he speaks so much about you and your competence.
Well, my competence is what it is. And I think I think it's not competence though. There are times when people connect and it's all about there's some energy and people say it's karma, whatever it is. But Vince's brother and I, we played cricket for Dominica. Beck was his name, fast bowler from St. Joe. And he was my very good friend. Beck was a good friend of mine. I could always depend on Beck to bowl 12 over spells. Strong man from St. Joseph. You know, sometimes when these young boys bowl 4 overs and they stop bowling, I wonder what's wrong with them. I hear West Indies bowlers can't even bowl 5 straight overs. Beck could bowl 12 on the trot and still want to go even after that. But Beck was Vince's older brother. And I think that's where that connection came from. But I will tell you that the people that really supported my wife and I very well in the government would have been Minister Henderson and Mr. Lambert, Eddie Lambert as well. They would sit down and give us advice. I can't say that we got some help through Dexter as well and Greg Thomas and his team there. There was some help. There's some discrepancy that I still think persists even to this day. But one of the things that I know that the state exists to do is to support business, is to support the emergence of businesses, is to ensure that the environment is created so businesses can flourish. And I think sometimes that the architecture that the state creates has to be one that builds. It cannot be one that we look back and see how it pulls down. We have to go beyond the minutia and look at the bigger picture. How can we make this person win? It's not a person you're making win, it's a country you're building. And as you build a country, the individual is important, but the big picture is far more important. And so sometimes we get mired down in the personality and we forget that we are building an environment that if success comes, it breeds additional successes. And I think that is where Eddie and Vince played a role in trying to motivate and encourage, and they did that. They certainly did it. And there were times when they had to create some avenues and come in and call up the dogs sometimes when we were having some difficulties. And so I would say thanks to them for that. There were some areas that I thought we could have had some more support. I think that the capacity to strengthen a local business that had emerged to the level where we had was missed. I think that is something that could have been dealt with differently and better. But in a small environment where experience has not yet been garnered to a level where we have seen something before, it's always difficult to try. But I would say to the government Minister of Agriculture, the new Minister of Agriculture now, there's some things you're going to have to just experiment with and try. There's some things that you've never done, never seen done. Be bold, be strong, do them. Let's get some people. Let's make some winners. It's important to try to create that space where a winner is made, and doesn't matter, where that person is from, what district they're from. Let's create winners, because it is the multiplying effect that actually creates the development that we want. And we too, as citizens of the country, has to understand our role in creating that space, so that we are prepared to expand beyond ourselves, to share our successes with the people that support and surround us. And so I think those two men were very instrumental in doing that. But that was what led me from Bully and Lewis, is what led me from Dominica, and now I'm in Antigua.
No, you're in Antigua, and you just gave a report of how you were able to reach to Antigua via the influence of the World Bank. You have now found yourself in Antigua, I think way back in 2009, 2007.
2013.
2013.
December 19th, I think, was my first trip up there in 2013, yes.
Okay, so you found yourself in Antigua, being the CEO. Tell me how challenging it was on arrival, just understanding logistics and maybe not necessarily ports. What were the challenges like?
Well, here's what I would say. Before we get into the whole concept of the logistics, let me walk you through a very interesting period. So I came into Antigua with the World Bank initially, and remember, I would have had some awareness as to the challenges that existed in the port. So I'm walking into that space knowing what some of the issues are. So sometimes folks forget that I would have had a very detailed look into the challenges. Some of them were financials, some of them were operational, some of them had to do with human resource capacity, equipment, some of them had to do with the structure of the port, the transformation that had taken place in the sector, the maritime and port sector had not yet reached within the borders of Antigua. So there were all sorts of challenges. And so I'm now coming in, and in my mind, I had been around World Bank experts. We had been discussing ideas, strategies, developing strategic plans. Now I'm here in Antigua, no longer at the bank, but equipped with support from the bank, as well as the experience I had garnered in the industry myself, and among my friends who have a world of experience and knowledge at the World Bank. And I'm going to take on a responsibility to reverse the trend of a port in trouble, port that had not been able to pay bills, a port that was running deficits. When I walked in, Antigua port had gone away from generating upwards of almost $40 million. They were now down to 21 million. Monies were, the whole transformation had happened, and we had to fix that. And so we sat down and with my team, and we started looking at how can we fix that. We started doing some adjustments to things. And what I can say is that we want to say it's God's hand. We want to say it's luck. Some people want to say luck is not good to speak of, but if it's I think it's God's hand and His wisdom, actually, more or less. I would say that so my wife doesn't beat me up. It's God's hand that guided us and gave us the wisdom as to know what to do. And so we walked in, and the port, as most Caribbean ports are, in real trouble, looking for ways to emerge. And we made some changes.
Let me ask you, Darwin,
Yes.
you're coming from Dominica, a Dominican by that. Yes, it is true that you made your debut in cricket in Antigua. Yes, it is true that you went to school in Antigua. But yet still quite a number of people did not know you in the Antigua environment. How easy or how difficult it was to really manage the number of men and women from the Antigua point of view in reference to the employment or the employees that you would have had to manage?
It was a very interesting moment. First of all, Antigua is like a second village, the bigger, brighter village in Dominica, the one with more activities. The connection is unreal. It's symbiotic. It's Antigua, Barbuda, and Dominica, or you could say the other way around. But it looked like there were so many of my people from Wesley, from Marigat, from Woodville here when I showed up. It was like, wow, I feel like I'm kind of home. But there was the resentment. Oh my goodness, it was really bad. It was really bad. It was like, where is this Dominican coming from? No, the whole concept of migration, xenophobia, the fear, the anxiety that people have. He's coming. Why is he? Why him? He's not from here. Give some other Antiguan the job. But I mean, there was a passion that I came here with, because when I would not have had a proper continuation of my education, when I would not have had a chance to be who I am, this country, Antigua, accepted me and gave me an opportunity. So now that I'm in a position to lend them my services, to give them all that I can, it was not a job I came to do. I came to give back. I came to deposit some of my experience, my learning, into a space that required it. It was a space that invited me with open arms. The minister, the prime minister at the time, Honorable Bowen Spencer, at that time, and the minister, Harold Lovell, they were ready to ask me to take it and help them. And man, I was ready to do that based on what had happened before. And so we started doing things, and the door was left open for me to go ahead and do what I wanted to do. And so we went from the first year, we saw some changes. So from 2013, 21 million, we ended 2014 at about 26 million. We had a deficit, so we went from having a deficit of 8 million in 2013 to a deficit of 6 million in 2014. And by 2015, we had erased the deficit as we moved the port's earning from 26 to 31 million. And that year in 2015, because of the transformation we had given, we earned the Port of the Year award from the Port Management Association of the Caribbean, making us the most efficient port in the Caribbean for 2015. We moved from 28 million or 30 million in 2015 to 36 million in a year in 20. We won the cup again, and back to back we won that. That year I was nominated as the chairman of the OECS Port Committee and the vice chairman of the Port Management Association of the Caribbean. And Antigua began to emerge as a port environment that was prepared to lead for the transformation of the port sector in the region. And we were ready to take that task on. We then embarked on the process by which we were going to seek a loan to redevelop the port. That had been a plan for a long time. And so we started that as well. And in 2017, we grew the revenue again. In 2018, we more than doubled the port's income from where we started in 2021. So the port was on a trajectory, just growing and expanding. And Cecile, we did all of that expansion in revenue without changing any fees, without adding any new fees. We simply did a couple of things. We started looking at where the leaks were, where we were not doing the proper billings, where we were not doing the right collections, where we were ensuring that the tariff was being applied properly. And so simply by ensuring that the things that we needed to look at, the details, we focused there, we fixed the operation. One of the things that I did walking into the yard is Antigua had a large land space, so, just a big open space in the port yard. And I walked in and I thought, why are we using all this space? Now, experience is a very important thing, because I came from the port in St. Thomas. If you remember, I mentioned I was there first. And we were using a small area in the back of the port yard to handle 6 to 7 times the volume of cargo that we had in Antigua now. So when I walked in the yard, I said, why are we using all that space? And so the first thing I told my operation manager, we're going to shrink the port. He said, everyone was like, what do you mean shrink the port? I said, I'm going to put a ribbon across the yard and no one goes beyond the yard, do everything inside the ribbon. Oh, it can't happen. I said, well, that's your mission. Get it done. And to make a long story short of that, that simple move of shrinking the port saved us almost $3 million in expenses, in man hours, less equipment problems, less breakdowns of equipment, because we weren't running all over the place doing crazy stuff. We were doing things the right way. So shrinking the space made it possible for us to have a better profit margins at the end of the day. It also ensured that we kept a lot, and it ensured that we kept a lot more of our money. So we were making money, we were becoming more efficient, and the port was on the right track. And
so hearing this from you, all right. So what would you say now? I'm going to ask a question. So what you think are the most significant challenges then that will be facing the Caribbean ports, in as much as you came into Antigua, you saw what the challenges were, and you immediately dealt with it. So what would you think now in the region that would be the most challenging issues that will be confronting the ports?
I would say to you, Cecil, no. Here's how I'd answer that. If you were to ask me, well, can you go run a port? I would say, of course I can. Now, that is not something that a lot of people can say, because I came from tropical shipping. I was at the port in St. Thomas, handling the operation there. I was in St. Kitts, where I handled the tropical shipping operations at the port in St. Kitts. So, and I was in West Palm Beach and different places at the ports. So I knew what was going on at the ports. So, but it was on the vessel side, all right? Except in St. Thomas, we did both. We did the vessel operation, and we actually leased the port from the Port Authority. So we were running our own operations in St. Thomas. So the fact that I came to the job with knowledge makes a difference. And so one of the challenges that I know exist in our space, first, is the critical nature of our ports requires a particular expertise in ensuring, well, in its management, in its strategic alignment, in understanding its role to the economy, in understanding its role to the socialization of its people, and its understanding the role as a domestic engine of growth, transformation, and efficiency. Now, your question is a very interesting question, because I could say I was prepared for the job, not by coming into the job, as we are in so many instances, selected based on mostly political reasons. And I say this with an abundance of care, but I would say that ports are too critical for us to be switching people and appointing people without the knowledge and experience to manage them. They touch too many things. It is too crucial. It's like asking a dentist to do a brain surgery. We would never do that. So our ports should not be exposed to untrained minds. Yet, where do we get that training from? It's one of the challenges that exists in our Caribbean, which is why, Cecil, that MOU that we did with Panama the other day, it's something that I'm driving. We need more people to understand the sectorial and changes that are happening within the international space, where vessels are coming to us expecting different things, and we need to be prepared. We need to have more people prepared. So the first thing I would say that is a challenge for ports is the human resource capacity is underserving the establishment itself and the citizens and the economy that it serves. We need to beef that up. We have to ensure that we invest in training our people. We have to ensure that we invest in putting them in the right spaces to understand not the local dynamics only, but to ensure that they are aware as to how to connect with a global change that is happening at record pace, with the technological enhancement that's happening within the sector, as well as the legislative and regulatory changes that's going on within the region, internationally, and also within the legislative, from a legislative perspective at home. So all of these things have to be looked at. And I see that in most countries, and I mean, we just had an election, and one of the discussions that was going around the radio is that the government change, they would fire the port manager. It's almost become like clinical. A government change, we change the port manager. And sometimes we too, as port managers, ought not to be so involved in expressing our political views. We should be apolitical, so that the port manager's job becomes more of a professional role instead of the role that it now serves. It is too important to take that vital node that actually handles all the things we eat, all the things we wear, all the things we use for our housing, our basic needs, as well as all of the complex things we need, pharmaceuticals, furnishing, vehicles, all of that comes into our port. And when our ports contribute to the cost in delivering those services to us, they harm our people. So the objective in fixing the human resource piece is to ensure that our people are better prepared to serve our people. And I want to say one more thing on that part there, is that most of our ports, all of our ports, are what I call domestic ports, meaning that we only serve the local space. So Woodbridge Bay serves Roseau, Portsmouth, Wesley, Marigot, all of Daly Seas and Grand Bay everywhere. That's what Woodbridge Bay serves. Woodbridge Bay is not serving St. Vincent or Grenada or any place else. So its domestic nature means that it now has to internalize its ability to efficiently impact on quality of life, cost of living in Dominica. And that doesn't happen when you have someone who is brand new coming into the space. So
let me ask a question. You came in by the Ball and Spencer administration in 2013. Yes. You have since then served 2014, 2018, and 2023 under the Gaston Blanc administration. What's the difference?
Yes. I think, well, what I would say is the role that I've played has been the same. And the role has been to ensure that the port contributes to national development, enhancing the services to the private sector, ensuring that there is greater improvement in the logistics that we deliver, whether it be the physical improvements that we just made or the technological improvements we're putting in place, or moving customs from being uptown into the port space, so you don't have to leave the port to go to the controller to come back to the port. Similar to something that we have in Roseau, which is something that I've always thought we needed to do here. So bringing all of this together enhances the quality of service. So we've seen that so the port's transformation has continued from one administration into the next, and so I would say it's been pretty much a consistent thrust for the port itself. There are different styles with each leader. Prime Minister Gaston Brown is a totally different leader than former Prime Minister Darwin Spencer. Their styles are different, their philosophies are different. And so that is something that we as professionals have to adjust to, but the job remains the same. We have to enhance socialization and transform the fortunes of the private sector so that they can continue to win. Because when you have a bill of lading that is challenging to the local store owners, and then we at the port add additional expenses to that, either by delaying when they get it, causing them to miss sales, not being able to deliver it for days because we have issues tied up in there, that is us hurting us. And so the thing that we control, which is landing on the dock and delivering it through the port gate, we control that. We have to make that as efficient as possible. And that's what our mission is. As a matter of fact, I tell people all the time, ports and customers are often there's always a challenge, and we need to fix that. But the one thing that we see is what's on the end of the bill of lading. Tropical's bill of lading says 7,000. Seaboard says another number. CMA says another number. But what we don't see is the cost from the port to your warehouse. You don't see that on a number, and we are slothful in addressing what that cost is. And that is the part that we control. So part of the strategy we are adopting in Antigua as well is to understand what that cost is and eliminate most of it if we can. And most of that has to do with time, efficiencies, and having the right equipment to ensure that it moves through the system.
No, Darwin. I used to be a port director for some years, about over a decade, and I always had a concern about integration of Caribbean ports. Do you believe in the integration of Caribbean ports? Just hearing from you that whenever, as a port manager, you look at the domestic aspect of it, but what about the extension, which is the integration? Do you believe in the integration of Caribbean ports?
Well, I think that question actually falls within the whole integration movement. We are, after all, on the path towards making CSME the law of the land. We want to have an integrated region. I would say that sometimes we look like we're going backwards with it, but at least the word on the ground is that we want to have a CARICOM single market and economy. That's what we've been saying for a long time. Hasn't moved the way we want to, but that's the objective. Secondly, the OECS has moved towards integrating their economies at a more rapid pace. And to prove that, which is to say that there's integration, we can now move freely between every OECS country. I'm in Antigua as an Antiguan with my Dominican passport, or even if I have an Antiguan passport, I can go to Dominica and live there just the same. I can go to Grenada, St. Vincent, any one of the OECS islands. So, Cecil, there's already integration. What we have missing, though, is to understand how transport and logistics can be further integrated towards the betterment of our people. And we don't do that very well because we function at the table when we speak. We say nice things about integrating, but our strategies are silos, independent of each other, structured so that no one is aligning themselves with a common objective. And there are many instances where we see that. I like to use LIAT as an example to explain this. LIAT existed in Antigua. LIAT existed in Antigua to connect the region. And that's one of the ways that air and sea can actually work together. Well, it's actually the same thing because it's logistics. It's moving people or moving goods or combination of both. And so we have Antigua VC, well, Coolidge first. When I arrived, it was a little airport, busy airport, but smaller than what it is now. And nothing like what it is right now, actually. It was Coolidge, then VC Bird. But what happened at VC Bird was that we were better connected because we were integrated by what I call a hub. And what we're missing to have the integration you speak of is what's that hub? I did an academic journal. It's called The Challenges Facing OECS Ports and the Role of Antigua and Barbuda in Solving those challenges. And from my assessment and the research that I did, it is crucial in every region in the world to find a hub. It is not regions that make themselves. Hubs create regions. What I mean by that is you need a central point where you can build economy of scale to be able to move things and people efficiently. If each of us in a small geographic space act independently of each other, we're going to diminish the connectivity that we're trying to build. In other words, straight lines don't work in regions. The integration means that we are joined in a particular way. And so as we speak of regional transport, whether it by maritime or by aviation, we are seeing the effect of not having an efficient hub at VC Bird, what it means. You can't get to Dominica tomorrow from Antigua. What a different world we're in. You can't get to Dominica on Tuesday from Antigua. That's a strange thing. And what would change that is if we had a more structured arrangement where we decided that rather than move our people to Barbados, which is not part of the OECS, we should do that in an OECS country. As a matter of fact, this is not a bashing on Barbados either, because what we've done in dismantling LIAT is we've moved people back to Miami. We've actually made Miami the hub for the region, and at the expense of an OECS hub. And so from where I sit, what we are seeing is we are not creating the type of integration logistically that would make us work. And
that is my concern, though, too, Darwin, that in the creation of international airports, which is very good in terms of the infrastructure for every country. We have seen now a lot of the logistics of people movement more or less getting into other territories than that of our own territories. And I do not know how are we going to help in fixing that logistics that we should be now trying to solve in terms of people movement in the region.
That's a fair point. But I will tell you why I'm speaking that way by air, because I like to say that as goes air, so goes maritime. When you're disconnected by air, there's no reason to be connected by maritime. That's the danger. Regions are connected in both ways. And in some parts of the world, they're connected by air, by ocean, and by rail. Europe is an example. You can move on a ship from one part of Europe to the next. If your cargo is that large, you don't move it on a train, you don't move it on a plane, you move it on containers from Antwerp to Rotterdam, from Rotterdam to the other side of London. Yeah, but if you have a small bag, you can go on a train from Germany through France into London. But that's logistics in a space. But what you'd find, however, is if you're going to Amsterdam or Germany or Italy from London, you're not going on Virgin or any of the big airlines. You're going on West, EasyJet, RedJet, all the jets you find there. They're set up because Gatwick is the hub into Europe at London or a Heathrow, and from those major hubs, small airlines move. Liat was that connection. Liat was that connection by air from Antigua, and we have dismantled it. It is not the airline or the pilots or the cost of the airline that is creating the problem. It is the proliferation of infrastructure that created the direct landing of aircrafts directly from parts of the world to these islands that have diminished the hub. So the hub is no longer necessary, and therefore you're having an ease for your tourism passenger, but a difficulty for your domestic space. And it is you don't create integration for tourism. You first have to create integration for your domestic space, and then when that space is domesticated, travel becomes easier. And we saw that with the hub in Antigua building out not just Liat, but also Caribbean Star when that other gentleman tried to build a competing element to Liat. It was all done in Antigua because all the major aircraft landed there. Why am I saying that? I'm saying that because now that we've built a cargo terminal in Antigua, the only one in the OECS, yeah, the only one in the sub-region, as a matter of fact, that hub is constructed well. It's large enough to facilitate traffic into all the OECS islands. I am afraid we're going to see the same thing because soon, because Antigua has built a port, we're going to see every other OECS country say, let's build one too. And that's the error that we make. What we have to figure out now is how do we use that port to our benefit? So when you ask about integration, I would like to sit with the board and the minister of the port in Dominica, with my minister and my board, and we discuss how can the port in Antigua ensure that Dominica is better served? How can the port in Antigua ensure that Dominica doesn't need to have $150 million spent on building another port? Is that possible? How can the engagement between Antigua Port and Dominica Port leads to further engagement between the port in Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, and thereby giving us that connectivity that we yearn for on the maritime side?
But what about sovereignty, Darwin? When you speak of the fact that, because what I'm hearing you, I'm making mention of is a merger of ports into maybe one space. But I would like to find out from you, though, Darwin, in reference to sovereignty. Every country, every person from a country wants to ensure that he's able to send for his goods in Miami or in London or wherever the case is. You don't think sovereignty is going to affect that whole machination of integration in terms of ports?
Very good question. And I would answer it with a simple statement. Economics doesn't have sovereignty. Economics is a science. If there is enough, it continues. When there is no more, it stops. There was enough for Liat to keep going. When there isn't any more, transport stops. We are seeing slowing down of the options for maritime transport that we are not addressing as a region. 20 years ago, we had 15, 16, 18, 20 shipping lines serving the Caribbean. And many, I'm not sure how many people are listening to your show tonight, but I will tell you, if Dominicans are listening, they would remember them. All right, there was Burnoof Line, that's no longer there. There was Kent Line, that's no longer there. There was Tech Marine Line, that's no longer there. There's Navieras of Puerto Rico, that's no longer there. There was High Shipping, there was Thompson Lines. So many lines that existed before. You can call them out, they're not there. Sea Freight, no longer there. Crowley, no longer there. You keep going. Well, what's happening? The numbers are, they're disappearing because the numbers to sustain them are not there. So we've gone from 1920 lines a few years ago. Not all of them serve everywhere in the region, but or every market. But I'll tell you, how many do we have now? We have 4 major lines serving our area now, 4. And of the 4, all right, because I'm not even counting Geese, because Geese comes every 2 weeks or thereabouts. Those that serve us on a regular basis, we have Tropical Shipping, we have CMA CGM, we have King Ocean, and we have CMA CGM. Okay, those 4 lines. Now, I will tell you what's troubling about that. Seaboard Marine, of the 4 that I just called, decided just before the end of COVID that they were not going to do Dominica, St. Vincent, St. Kitts, St. Martin, St. Lucia, Grenada, none of these ports anymore. They were pulling out of those ports, which they did. So Seaboard Marine is signaling to us that they're only going to go to a few ports. They go from Jamaica, Miami, Santo Domingo, Antigua, Barbados, Trinidad. That's it. This was a line that went to every single port before. That line is no longer doing that because it is not working out for them to go to every small port. One of the challenges we have as a region is as we demand that these big ships goes to small ports, the big ships are hurting. And you might want to research this and have your reporters pay attention to this as well, Cecil. The challenge we're faced with is that as these big lines are dying and moving away, we are not paying enough attention to the container ships that serve us. We go to shipping conferences for cruise ships. We go to all types of places where cruise ships exist. As a matter of fact, usually the minister of the port goes to those conferences, but we don't see them going to the conferences where the cargo ships are. Now, why am I saying that? We need to start paying attention to the health of these cargo ships because we spent 2 years with no cruise ships coming to our ports. Can we survive 2 months or 2 weeks without the cargo ship coming to our port? And if these cargo ships are so critical to our livelihood, why aren't we paying more attention to what's happening with them? Well, it may not be as sexy as the cruise business, may not be something that we see or pay attention to so much, but I'm sounding the alarm. As we have seen more and more ships disappear, so we ought to be asking the question to the shipping lines, what is your state of health? Are you okay? Are you going to be here for a long time? We went from a number of double digits to 3.5, which is where we are now. And of those 3.5, it could be 3 very soon, or it could be 2. So
let me ask you that.
Just 1 second. Let me just wrap up here. When that happens, you will find ships deciding, you know what? There are just some markets that are not worth going into because they're too small. Now, we do not have the options in place to respond. So it is urgent for us. I will tell you something. Sorry for cutting you off there, Cecil. I will tell you something. No one could tell me that Leah, which landed in Melville Hall 8 or 9 times every single day, would be in the predicament that it's in so quickly. I would never believe that. In my lifetime, it seemed it would never happen. It is happening, and we cannot respond. We do not want that to happen by sea, and I am suggesting that one of the ways we fix that problem is to create greater synergies around the ports.
So that's what I was about to ask you. So that's what I was about to ask you. What is the best formula whereby cruise and cargo can exist?
Well, but let me finish this, and I'll come back to that in a minute. The formula that I'd like to posture here is that we now need to say that if the big ships are having difficulties surviving with all these multiple stops, and Cecil, you just asked about cruise. Some of those stops are further impeded by cruise ships that sit at the berth all day long, and the ship comes in at night. And even when we keep the ships out all day and they come in at night, we charge them overtime. Their cost goes up. In some ports, they don't pay the overtime right away, but it catches up because the ship has to stay there all day. So the cost is exorbitant. And if that happens in multiple ports, the ships are not happy. So how do we solve that? We solve that by, I am suggesting, and I am not suggesting this because I'm the port manager of the Port Authority in Antigua. I am saying in Antigua, we've spent $100 million to build out a port. That port can now be used as an area where we can put the cargo for smaller ports or for those ports close by. And we, all the ports together, can own the vessel that moves the cargo from Antigua to each of our ports. That's how we find a solution for the connectivity that we yearn for. We create LIAT by sea. It is us to do. It is a creative way that we fund the ship by having the carrier that put it in Antigua pay us to take it to the last mile. And that finances that operation. It's a strategy that I believe we can do either directly with the ports and the government or with a private partner doing a PPP option, but it is something that I'm suggesting that we take a look at.
So you believe that a PPP action is very viable in our parts in the region?
Absolutely. I just outlined what I think would be the saving grace of us, because with that vessel leaving here, going down 4 or 5 islands, coming back, it is going back around. So we don't have any issues now of moving produce in a proper way north, yeah, or taking it from north down south. So we can move. For the first time, we would now have connectivity that we could even expand. Because if we are doing it well among the northern OECS, we can say, okay, how can we integrate St. Vincent, Grenada, and St. Lucia into that mix? And we say, okay, great. So let's get another option, and we can start it in St. Lucia. So that ship that starts here can make one stop in St. Lucia. St. Lucia feeds St. Vincent nearby and Grenada, and we have a loop. So we can own that by integrating these ports together.
So you're saying, Darwin, that you would like to see an integration where a ship comes from Miami, London, or wherever it comes from, and to use you as a hub and put all of the cargo at your shed, at your port, and Dominica boats can come across and to get those goods across to the country. And you are also lamenting the fact that if it is successful in the southern part of the OECS, that it can be done in the north. Is that what you're saying?
Actually, I'm not. I don't want it to be a Dominica boat. I want it to be a vessel that is owned jointly between Montserrat, Nevis, St. Kitts, Dominica, and Antigua initially. All right, and that makes the round. Each market gets the appropriate benefits based on the share value, based on the volumes that they have. So if Dominica is 20%, if there's a profit margin, it gets that. And then we expand it from the north to include St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Grenada.
Is it something like Federal Palm and Federal Maple were doing some years ago?
Very well. And we can recreate that, but you need volumes to do that. And those volumes can come through direct negotiation with the carriers that serve the region. And I'll tell you, we may be surprised to hear what these carriers are saying. They've not said anything to me directly, but I'm saying they might be happy to hear, wow, if you have the right instrument, if the structure is in place, and we could even ask them to partner with us to do this. So it's a way of saying you have a big ship, 1,200 TEUs. You're going to ports with no crane, and you're taking 14 hours to take off 30 or 50 boxes. But what if you didn't have to do that? And we have the right instrument to do it. And all we're doing is finishing the journey for you. You pay us to do that. We control the port cost so we can mitigate that. The port benefits directly because now you have the cargo revenues that is being generated now being appropriated to that port in terms of their percentage of the profit margins. And then you now have connectivity from that port because it can load all its goods for any part of the region to go back to the hub. We need that hub. Rotterdam is in the Netherlands. It's in the smallest country in Europe. It is the largest port in Europe. It is the hub that serves most of Europe. All right. So I'm not saying it has to be the biggest country. I'm not saying that it has to be, but we need one. And the reason I'm saying this is a good one is because we have the space, we have the capacity, we're building the human resource component to do it. We have the equipment pool to do it. And so we now should be looking at how we share that port with our neighbors, particularly our OECS neighbors. Yes?
You made mention earlier on in reference to proper port facilities. I want to find out from you, what impact does the lack of proper port facilities have on our Caribbean economy, in as much as you're talking about that whole issue of integration?
Oh, well, that's a very good question. I can give you an easy example. Antigua and Barbuda has a mobile harbor shore crane. That crane can discharge up to 28 containers per hour. 28 containers per hour. Yeah. The ship comes to Antigua and Tropical brings in 134 containers just about in Antigua. So you do the maths. We can discharge that in 4 or 5 hours. Or 6 hours, sorry, 6 hours, we discharge the ship. We take another 3 hours to load it back. We put on, because we can double up on the back loading. So we can put back another 100 units. And in 9 hours, we can discharge and load back the ship. The ship goes to Nevis. Same ship, same size ship. That ship goes to Nevis. Nevis has no crane. The ship has to use its own crane, but it has to stay in Nevis to offload 30 containers for maybe 6, 7, 8 hours to complete the discharge, and then another 6 hours to load it back. This is the best example that I can tell you of what not having the right equipment means. Now, imagine that in 2023, when the industry have moved away from the break bulk operation, we have ports that are, all the ports are still break bulk ports. The port in Dominica is a break bulk port. The one in St. Kitts is a break bulk port. Barbados, Grenada, St. Vincent, all of those are break bulk ports, except Antigua. We just built off the first container terminal in the region.
What do you mean by break bulk?
It means that the warehouse is stocked right on the dock so that pallets would be loaded straight into the warehouse from the ships. That's why they're built that way. They weren't built for containerization, all right? The ports were built in the 60s and containerization showed up, containers showed up in the 70s, the early 70s, but the port was already built. So from the early 70s to now, the lines have been struggling as they bring containers to handle them in a non-containerized environment. So the environment is bad, the lack of equipment is bad, they don't have the right technology, we don't have the right human resource capacity to interface with the ship and interface on the land side. And so you have all of these, plus you have, regardless of all of these deficiencies, the ports are not necessarily the cheapest place to do business. So now you have a carrier that is facing a lot of archaic arrangements. Some of them are archaic union agreements, archaic tariffs, all right, plus the other deficiencies that exist. Yet the ports are charging the ship significant sums of money. So the ship keeps asking itself, and I've been asking the question myself too, if you keep going to a port and we're spending millions of dollars every year and the ports are the same, at some point you're wondering, why don't we see change? We're not seeing the change that should exist in the region. And maybe what we now need to do is to say, how can we reduce the burden on the lines. And I would dare say that the way we do that is by limiting where the lines go, bring your cargo to one place. We will then take the grind of moving it from here to where it needs to go. Your ship goes back, you serve us better. Because what we want is to ensure that we can get our goods into the region and then we can carry it. So we win on both ends. We win by having the cargo delivered to us, and we win by having a structure that feeds us going to the market and coming back to the hub.
But
hub comes alive.
But now, if we have to look at economics, all right, money, dollars and cents, doing forecast of the dollars and cents, and you're talking about that hub. Some countries or governments may think hearing from you is indicating unemployment, lack of revenue into their space, and so would put much more revenue into your space. Let's say if Antigua is going to be the hub, or if St. Lucia is going to be the hub. What do you have to say about this?
That's a very, very interesting question. But let me ask you a question, and maybe I'll answer it. If cargo belongs to Dominica, and it's on tropical ship, and the tonnage on that ship is 5,000 tons, I'm giving you that number, and tropical lands it in Roseau, how much tons do they land in Roseau?
5,000.
If the ship picks it up, if the vessel that I'm speaking of, it's not tropical, picks up 5,000 tons in Antigua, how many ton lands in Dominica?
5,000.
How does Dominica charge for port charges?
That I'm not so sure.
It's on a per ton basis.
Per ton, okay, yeah.
Yes, okay. So, or it could be on a unit basis. So nothing is lost. The cargo belongs to the port. All you're doing is you are using revenue that the line would pay to carry it themselves, to take them out of that inefficient space, that challenging space, which they'll be probably happy to, I don't know. I think they may be. All right. And you're saying, let us now create from that challenge an opportunity. So Dominica Port will not lose one dime.
So what about efficiency? What about the issue of efficiency, timing? And in Antigua, I can almost say that that the Antigua stevedores and longshoremen would handle those goods of Dominica, the cargo of Dominica, on 2 occasions, while in Dominica it'd be 1. So when the ship comes from Miami to Antigua, the stevedore and longshoreman would have to handle it. And then when it has to leave from Antigua to Dominica, again, the stevedores and longshore men have to do that. So you're going to get, in terms of revenue to the employees of Antigua, that they will be getting double revenue than that of Dominica. What do you have to say about this?
The hub has to be financed. So for the hub to exist, it cannot not receive the benefit of the carriage. When Leah landed in Antigua, all right, it paid. When it took off, it paid. It's the same scenario. It didn't mean any difference, any loss to Dominica. I'm happy you're asking that, because I want everyone to understand there is no loss. It just creates a better opportunity. It creates an environment now where you did not have connectivity and now you have it.
Efficiency now and saving of time.
And by the way, if there's a cruise ship in Dominica on the Tuesday, we don't sail the ship. We wait until it's late in the evening, and then the ship leaves. And so that fuel that was burnt staying outside Woodbridge Bay for the entire day is no longer done.
Let's presume now that there is on a daily basis, ship is actually coming into Dominica, the cruise ship actually coming to Dominica. What happens?
Then we come in at night, and we are closer to you than having a ship come from all the way from Florida to sit outside there waiting. We are right here. We are 4 or 5 hours away from you.
So are you saying that a Caribbean shipping service should be viable or will be viable in the region?
I am saying the only way that you create transport opportunities is by reinvigorating your hub. You build a hub, you solve your problem, because the scale at the hub will allow for the cost to traffic, right, to be reduced. And that reduction makes it possible. It even makes it profitable. Won't be profitable right away, but over time it will. And on the back haul, it allows for you to no longer worry about how do I get this cargo to Nevis or St. Kitts or St. Martin. You don't have to worry. You send it to the hub, it gets to the market.
Because what I'm interested in, Darwin, is how does the transport really impact the lives of the Caribbean people? That's what I'm trying to gauge myself to when you're talking about that integration. How does that really impact on the lives of the Caribbean people?
Cecil, if you do nothing, we're going to continue seeing subtraction signs in the industry. The industry is only subtracting itself. There are no additions. If you do not have additions, we are going to have bigger problems than the one you are discussing. So I am suggesting that we have an opportunity. Let us sit down, let us meet. I have an intention of meeting with the Minister of the Port. She's going to be in Antigua. We're sending her an invitation to come to the Port Management Association meeting in Antigua in June. We're going to sit down. We're going to explore the possibility. We're discussing it with the Premier in Nevis. We're going to discuss it with the Prime Minister in St. Kitts, Premier Grantley, everybody around us. We're going to discuss that with them. And then when we create that understanding that this is something that we believe is relevant and necessary and can work, we draft a document and we go back to the lines and we say, here's what we're thinking. And now there's also something we can do. We can create legislation that tells the line, effective this and this time, your cargo will go to Antigua and we will work with you to move it from Antigua to the markets that are around us. There are no ships going into Montserrat, for example. They put it in Antigua sometimes, in St. Martin sometimes, and when they get a ship, they go across. That has to do with scale. I can also tell you there was a period of time when Suriname suffered from that. They had quite a few ships going there, and then a number of ships pulled out. They had one ship feeding that country, and the transit time for when they got replenished, when goods came in, went from 6 or 7 days to 14, 15, 16 days before they got replenished. The danger of not paying attention to what we're seeing, which is the subtraction sign for shipping lines into our markets, is something we have to pay attention to. And the reason I think these lines are disappearing is because we are not integrating around a hub. We have the capacity to do it. We have the partnerships. We have the relationships and the culture connecting us. I think it's a matter for us to sit down and work out the details to ensure that we can move it, because Dominica will handle the same volume of cargo that it does now. No difference. The tonnage will be the same. No loss.
I also want to find out from you, Darwin, what would be the relationship between the international transport and the regional transport? For me, I really want to get a clearer understanding between these two regions, because in our region, it seems that we are fighting for territories in terms of sovereignty. The international region, according to what you have said, that they are more or less working as one body. So I would like to find out from you, what is the relationship between the international transport and the regional transport?
Okay, so the one thing I can tell you is that what has happened internationally is every shipping line has defined what its hub locations are. For example, Hamburg Sud has decided that in this part of the world, it's going to hub its cargo in Cartagena in Colombia. That's a 3.5 million TEU port, and that's where Hamburg Sud puts most of their cargo. There are some instances when they drop off some in the Panama Canal, but the main hub for Hamburg Sud cargo is Colombia. If you ask CMA CGM, their main hub, international hub, is the Panama Canal and Kingston, Jamaica. So that's something they've designed. So what they've done is they don't go to all these places. They know the hubs, they transport their cargo to those hubs, and then you have feeder services taking it from those hubs back to where they're going. There's no way a vessel that carries 20,000 containers can go from one port to the next to the next. It wouldn't happen. So even on an international scale, the lesson is clear. You bring scaled volumes of cargo to a location. You have to decide that location, which is a problem that I know we have because everybody wants to be that location. Can't be. Singapore is one of those locations. Shanghai is one of those locations. The Rotterdam is one of those locations. The Panama Canal, Cartagena, Balboa, Caucedo in Santo Domingo, Kingston, Miami Port, LAX over in Long Beach. You have these international hubs. And when the cargo gets there, it's then filtered out to where it needs to go. Now, if you examine the cost to those hubs, that's where the benefit lies. Because right now, a container from Korea to Jamaica would only cost $2,000. From Miami to Dominica, $6,000, $7,000. Why is it different? Because the scale at which international traffic delivers to the hub changes. So what we may find is that when the ship doesn't have to go to all of the little islands, their cost may reduce. We may have better pricing landing in our region. The hub can transform our existence. Okay, so the other thing that we want to look at
just hold on, Darwin. So yes. in this case, tonnage is no longer the mathematical formula that has been used, because when we spoke earlier on, and we spoke about goods coming from Antigua to Dominica, and if it is 5,000 tonnage, that we pay whatever the tonnage is. So what would make the difference if goods come from Korea or goods come from Miami in reference to the tonnage cost would have cost much more for us?
Okay, I get what you're saying. More on containers are not, they're not charged by weight. Most of them are charged by containers. So it's a 20-foot container is this rate, it's a 40-foot container is X. Yeah, so you don't have tonnage calculations. Our ports are still in the archaic stage of having tonnage as a factor that we use at our ports. All right, so much so that the ports will convert the container tonnage to come up with the port charges instead of just having a flat box rate. Some ports have a flat box rate. Some ports have not done that yet. But that's
what Antigua has. What Antigua has.
We now have a per ton rate that we're moving into a box rate by June. We'll have a flat box rate by June. So we won't be doing any calculations on 20s or 40-foot container. If it's a 40, it's X. If it's a 20, it's X. And we'll be moving in line with international standards in that respect. But the salient point that I want to make in that respect here, in that regard here, and I can see your time. We may have to continue this another time. We have a situation where we can move from Japan into Kingston for just about $2,000. As a matter of fact, pre-COVID, some of the rates from Costa Rica, Honduras, or Brazil into Kingston, Jamaica was as low as $800. You cannot get these rates anywhere in our region because the ship has so much expenses from one port to the next to contend with that they cannot give you the benefit of a better rate. Okay, the challenges are just too great. So if you have a predictable cost into a space with an on-carriage amount that's also predictable, we may just save the lines. That's my reasoning tonight. Try to say, let's look at a different way. Let's look at a new methodology and a new concept to try to save what is a diminishing arrangement on the maritime side, similar to what we see at air. If we do not think
it's like saying that simple like this, Darwin, is a bus from Roseau straight to Portsmouth will almost be cheaper than if you have to take a bus, go from down Roseau to Kinfield, then you hop off the bus, and you take another bus from Kinfield to Maho, you hop off the bus at Maho, and then you take another bus from Maho, and then you go to St. Joseph, hop off the bus, and at the end of the day, the trip that would have cost you $15 to go to Portsmouth is now costing you $40. That's what you're saying.
You couldn't have said it better.
And that's very important what you have just said.
That is essentially, I'm saying you have to have a hub. If one day we were trafficking from Roseau, all right, and then the next day the bus would take us to Grand Bay to go back to Portsmouth, nobody would want to do that. And sometimes that's what we're asking the ships to do, and they're going out of business. They're going out. All of them are challenged. They're not going to leave us because there's some that will stay there. But what will happen is that as the numbers continues to shrink, and remember what I said earlier, we ought to have a discussion with the lines, because once we know what their state of health is, we may be able to understand how great the risk is, because no one believed that we were going to be in this position. As a matter of fact, if you look at, I want to shout out my friend in Dominica, the port manager, Mr. Badwell. I wanted to do that earlier, as well as the chairman. I know she might be sleeping, Batita McKenzie of the port board. But if you look at, sorry, I wanted to say good evening to them earlier, so please forgive me. But I was saying, as you shape the discussion around trying to find the solution that you just described, if the efficiency of the hub, right, is not put in place, you're going to have the lines continually staring down the barrel of a gun, and they're going to be thinking, how long can I keep doing this? Especially because, Cecil, there are other challenges. It's not just that they're going from Maho to Roseau. It is that when you reach St. Joseph has a specific request that they have for the bus to do. So the bus has to wait 15 minutes before the passenger can come out. The bus has to have a particular way of parking so that the customer can step off the bus to go onto the walkway. And when they get there, there are other cars there before the bus. So many things goes into that, right? That it's driving the owners out of business. So we have to look and see how is it possible that we can arrive at a sweet spot with these carriers to say, hey, we want you to work with us to go from here to the other markets, help us build that. And as you help us build that, we become stronger. Because if we can connect each other, we can do more business between each other. And if we're doing business between each other, the economies of our islands will emerge to be stronger. The way we're doing it now, where the ship does not connect us, will always leave us vulnerable in terms of the intra-regional logistics. This gives us intra-regional logistics.
Now, as we're speaking about logistics, in everything that we do, especially in those present dispensation, you find that managers are now looking at SWOT analysis. Can you, as a port manager from Antigua, you have gone through the region, understanding the logics of services and cargo business in the region. What SWOT analysis would you be able to give us in reference to the region, to our region?
Well, I think there are, what are the strengths of our ports? I would say that one of the things that's, I would say that there there are not many strengths that we have, but we rely on marine transportation almost 90%. So there will be an opportunity for some type of vessel to serve us. That is a fact. So you don't have air freight competing, you don't have trains, there are no railways. There is a maritime corridor that is in place, and so there is that strength. What are our weaknesses? Our weaknesses are our port infrastructure is archaic, outdated, not in line with containerization. We have challenges in human resource capacity development. We have limited technology. We have archaic legislation that governs the tariffs that serves us, and even the corporate governance structure that exists at our ports. We have challenges as it relates to the type of well, I said legislation, I said the union agreements as well. We have some archaic union agreements that exist, and the dearth of modern technology that exists in our port space are some of the weaknesses that we have at our ports. What are the opportunities? We do not have currently a hub to operate from. I would suggest the following. Kingston, Jamaica is the only international hub in the English-speaking Caribbean. It is the only port that receives all ocean international traffic from the globe, Kingston, Jamaica. So we need to find a way to connect Kingston to the Eastern Caribbean. There is an option with a carrier called Caribbean Feeder Services that comes from Kingston. It goes to Barbados, Trinidad, Guyana, and Suriname. We need to figure out how that could play a greater role. But one of the reasons why it doesn't come into some of our markets is because, once again, the volumes just are not there. And they've spoken directly to me about that on many occasions. So we have to figure out how we connect with Kingston. And I think the way we do that is we hub from Kingston to one of our ports, and then we feed from that port. So there's that issue there that continues to show up. The other opportunities, I would say, is that we could look at integrating our ports in specific ways. Maybe not moving to where you challenge the sovereignty, but in terms of the service patterns and engagement at cooperating towards the hub formation, as well as the building the intra-regional connectivity. That's another opportunity as well. What are the threats? If we do not, well, the threats are, we've seen the threats. We've seen carriers leave. We are not seeing carriers being added. We're not seeing new entrants into the shipping space for a long time.
And you're talking about the Caribbean. And you're talking about the Caribbean.
Yes, I'm talking about where we live.
Yes.
In addition to that, our ports are being challenged by the disappearance of ships with regards to their earnings. Port calls by cargo ships is mostly what ports benefit from. When port calls disappear, you have the same amount of staff, same equipment, same structure, you now have less revenue. And therefore, to answer this adds to the question, to the point that you raised a while ago.
So in terms of the challenges that one that you're speaking about,
yes.
While the ports may see less revenue, in effect, we would also see more expense on the port side, because the getting into our ports would be much more expensive.
Yes, and with less carriers calling, Dominica used to have many more carriers calling at one time. Well, they're not calling anymore. Tech Marine is gone. Burnhoof is gone. Crowley is gone. King O. I think King Osha is coming in. Is still coming in there. But you don't have Kent lines. You don't. Lots of these lines are no longer coming into Dominica and in Antigua and other places. And so what you're seeing is the diminishing volumes of lines are creating challenges as it relates to utilization of equipment. Because you have the same manpower, your manning continues to be a challenge, and so your expense goes up as you have less and less lines. So on a given week, Whereas you would have at least 4 or 5 ships, container ships or cargo ships calling you, you're now down to 2. And woe be unto you, those 2 ships call on the same day. For the remaining 4 days or 3 days, you see no more ships calling, which is why I'm suggesting that we take a look at how we strategize going forward. Because even when some of the ports are going to consider building new ports, if you're not having new carriers coming, why in heaven's name would we be building bigger ports?
But you did it, Darwin. You did it in Antigua.
And I am saying that once it's done, it should not lead to a proliferation of you did it, so I will do it too. We should be strategic. Okay, so you have something. How can we use it to our benefit so we don't have to expense another 150 million? If we are integrating, that's what we should be doing.
My co-host in the person of Brian wants to ask your question.
I've been listening quite intently. As a good teacher, I've got to listen. Mr. Telemaque, you're talking about modernization.
Yes.
You're talking about cost-benefit analysis.
Yes.
You're talking about traditional behaviors and changing the attitude to ports to make it more efficient. I suggest with the ideas that you've just brought out that your other port managers within the OECS would be meeting at some point in time to discuss those issues. How soon are you going to do that?
June 26 in Antigua, 26, 27, 28, and 30th. And we are inviting the board chairman of every port. We are inviting the minister. They don't have to spend all those days, but we would like to have them be part of the initial discussion. We are going to have our prime minister, who is the minister of the port, Honorable Gaston Brown, address the body. We're going to have the OAS there. We're going to have CAIPA. We're going to have the Caribbean Private Sector, the CARICOM Private Sector Organization, CARICOM, CDB. We're going to have IADB. We're going to have a lot of entities there to listen to us strategize around an idea that can lead to better outcomes for our ports and our people.
Right. I hope that the meeting, and let me wish you all the best. I hope that those ideas that you've brought forward in terms of what's actually happening now, in terms of transport by sea, which affects the livelihood of Caribbean, especially those of the OECS, with brought on board. I don't only want it to be a talk shop. I want it to be something that not only the technocrats will have it, but at least the common ordinary man on the street, because I see implications in terms of the way we do things here, because we're talking about labor, the traditional way of doing things. You're now talking about containerized business within the OECS space. So I hope that discussions will take place, and at the end of the day, the man on the street would be able to even discuss it from a local point of view as how it goes to benefit people in terms of goods on the shelf, because that is a critical component. Because if the cost of transporting goods by sea increases, then this cost is ultimately transferred to the consumer. We always pay for it, the man on the street. So I hope those discussions will find a way that will make it more effective for OECS people. And I wish you the best of luck.
And as you say that, Darwin, someone from St. Lucia sent me a message, and the person said, "Good night, Cecil." He is so very right. There are hubs in Jamaica, Curacao, and Trinidad for the larger carriers. We should have one in the OECS as well. So you have someone who is in support of you. Another person said that he said that where is it? He said, bro, we need this guy in Dominica. What do you think, Darwin?
I'm in Dominica. Every part of me is there.
Meaning that to be employed and to help in the management of the port.
And my answer is the same. I am there. I am assisting in shaping the structure around OECS and CARICOM ports, and I am I am on DBS Radio tonight, and the honor is mine. Cecil, thank you, and you too, Mr. Brain. I think that the opportunity to do this with my country is something that I value a lot. I am not away from it. I'm in it. I want to see us improve it. And so to be physically in Dominica is irrelevant at this point. I believe that the ideas we have can transcend where we sit and where we work. We can adopt strategies, we can share, we can plan. And I want to say this to you, Mr. Brain. Sometimes we think about the thing that we can see. And so the price at Whitchurch or at Fresh Market would be something we can see. But it's something that we are not seeing. And we cannot ignore it. We are not seeing a Liat flight tomorrow into Dominica. Not seeing a cargo ship for 1 week is even a greater challenge. And I'm saying, it's not to land fear in anyone, when you do not have the type of environment that is conducive to these lines, whereby they are, let me explain this even in a simpler way, Cecil and Brain, and to the Dominican public, whoever is still up listening. Today, there is more cargo in the Caribbean than at any time in my lifetime. We have fewer ships carrying that cargo. The cost of that cargo on ships has never been greater. So we have higher rates and more cargo. So if economics is a reality, there would naturally be competition. There would be people scrabbling to get into the mix. The reverse is happening. People are leaving. Why would Seaboard be pulling away from an environment where there's more cargo? Why would they cancel ports?
And Darwin, I'm happy that you're saying that. You know why I'm happy that you're saying that? Because I've been hearing this discussion in some circles, and they tend to think that it is just a Dominica situation. And I'm happy that you are able to identify that it is now a Caribbean situation, and you're asking on all Caribbean leaders to come together, put their heads together, and to see how best they can help solve that situation by creating a hub.
But one of the things that before he comes in there, that everybody's thinking in terms of profit margin. Everybody looking at their books. So whether you have more cargo coming in within the region, the fact is this multinational corporations that run the shipping business are always being driven by profit margins. So therefore, it is essential that what he's saying, there is a central point that the cargo would be placed in so that they don't have to travel within the region, little islands, to create more cost to them. It's a whole new order. Money drives the economy, and people are not in business for their health. They're in business for profit. And that's what's happening within the OECS region now, where persons now need to realize that this is a new game in tongue. And what Darwin is saying is just like cricket. You either learn the cricket scientifically or you lose your game. Simple as that. West Indies is not playing cricket scientifically. They keep losing. It's a science now. It's a new approach to business.
Well, I will also say that even if the government has to subsidize that arrangement in the initial stages, it is worth doing it. Because what you don't want is to have a replay of Liat on the seaside. And if we are honest with ourselves, St. Vincent a few years ago, used to have about 6 lines calling every week. They're down now to about 3. I mean, St. Lucia lost Seaboard. They lost Sea Freight. They no longer have the vast number of lines that used to call there, cargo lines, that is. Dominica lost about 3 lines. They're no longer coming. Antigua, we lost, in the last few years, we lost about 4 lines. If we are seeing the minus signs everywhere, it is to tell us, before we get to that critical stage, let's start strategizing. Gentlemen, I am in a country where there is probably 12 to 14,000 Dominicans living and working here, maybe more. If you did first and second generation Dominicans, there's way more here in Antigua. The integration that is needed needs very little reason to motivate us for it to take place. We are an integrated space already. And so the type of support that we now need is to simply put aside, the concerns of what would be the roadblocks and take a look at it. There's nothing that should hinder us. Let's have a hard look at it. Let's put some smart people from home. We have quite a few there. We have some people here. We sit down and we analyze it from people from St. Kitts across the board. Then we say, okay, this looks feasible. And we can go back to the governments and we say we need to raise X dollars. We ask the private sector to come in, and the private sector would be happy to be part of it. I'm sure, I know that for a fact. And with a private-public partnership in place, we have a hub created, we have the feeder service in place. And so you mitigate the exposure to the major carriers, you enhance connectivity, you build out a new regime, and we start winning, or at least we have a prospect of not going down the drain.
Let me ask you quickly, as we're coming down to the end. In November of 2022, in Trinidad, we saw that the Caribbean Investment Forum took place on the issues of transport and logistics. I just want to find out from you, Darwin, what was some of the revelation and some of the views emerged from that forum, listening to what you have to say as to whether or not those kind of information came out and what those port managers thought of the way forward.
Well, okay, so I was a speaker at that event, and I delivered what I thought was a well-received representation of my views. And since that time, I have been engaged by the Caribbean private sector organization, the CPSO. I've been engaged by IADB, CDB. I've been engaged by the Association of Caribbean States, and a number of agencies, Caribbean Maritime University, a lot of places, to actually continue to develop the thought. And what I proffered at the meeting is the following. I am of the view that he who controls shipping to the Caribbean controls the Caribbean. And if you doubt it, let's not have ships come into Dominica for 2 weeks. And even with a country that grows food, we begin to see massive problems. There are some issues that will take place. Some will be slower, but boy, in Dominica might not be so difficult, but in Antigua, I can tell you, or St. Kitts and other islands, it would be mass problems. I was in St. Kitts after Hurricane Lenny when the port was damaged, and I can tell you, I saw the stores empty, waiting for goods, and it took a while for them to come. And when the Prime Minister of St. Kitts stood on the dock and ordered that a container go straight to Rams, which was close by, it was because there were hundreds of people waiting at Rams to get food. And so I've seen that firsthand. So the urgency to understand that the controlling of shipping literally controls what we do led me to ask us to consider how we design transport and around a hub. And from my perspective, on the broader regional scale, there should be 3 or 4 main hubs serving our region. One should be in Kingston because it's our global location. Port of Spain, Trinidad, whether it be Point Lisas or Port of Spain, it's irrelevant. They can figure that out, but you need one there. And you need one in you can have one somewhere in between St. Lucia, Barbados to facilitate that space. And then another sub-region. So you have 2 sub-regional hubs and 2 main hubs, and then that ties in the Caribbean. One could be Antigua, one could be either St. Lucia or Barbados, and then that ties in the region quite nicely. If we did that, it would mean that there would be less challenges, greater connectivity, and we would now be in control of one part of what we do. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to get to Dominica easily tomorrow, you either have to fly to Miami today to get to Dominica today. I heard our Minister of Tourism mention some time back that she had to fly to Miami to get to Antigua. And I'm sure there are others who can tell stories about what they've had to do to get from one place to the next. We've heard the Grenadian Prime Minister lamenting the challenges he faces. All of these things are realities that have shown up because we have not strategically planned out what we're doing in regards to aviation. Let's not make the same mistake by sea.
I wish we had that conversation in 2000 when in Dominica we saw that the port was moving from hatches to containerized ships. And we saw the disarray and the confusion among the longshore and offshore men. And I wish that we had that kind of discussion in those early days to really help to guide us.
Well, that's a labor union issue. We can speak to that another time. But
right.
I think we've
met our marks.
Yes, we've used the time.
But before you go, Darwin, my last question to you would be: you spoke about it earlier on. You were in Panama just about under 2 weeks. Can you give us what was the results that you received in Panama and why you went to Panama?
Thank you, Cecil. Last week I spent the week in Panama. Week before last, I spent that period in Panama. And I went there after about a year of negotiation with the ambassador, Maria Leon, Ambassador Ron Saunders from Antigua. Ambassador Leon is the non-resident ambassador of Panama to Antigua. Ambassador Ron Saunders and Ambassador Webster, ambassadors of Antigua. Resident in Webster is in New York. Ambassador Webster is in New York. Ambassador Saunders is in Washington, D.C. We've been coordinating with these three gentlemen, guided by my Prime Minister and Minister of the Port.
Sorry about that, Darwin. I hate to interrupt you in that point, but someone is on the line for a while, so let's see what the person has to ask you. Good evening to you, caller.
Yes, good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
And I want to say to Mr. Telemaque, I have to give you a respect, sir. What you're doing there tonight, I hope it's not just idea falling on deaf ears. My brother, Braids, I want to tell you, sorry to call you Braids, but I want to say something faster because I no longer got much time. I thought that we had lie you out to it because you were so quiet. I thought that we had
I'm a very good listener. I'm a very attentive listener.
And Mr. Telemaque, I want to give you a respect. I don't know if you recognize the voice, but if you don't, you'll have to
that's Ashraf Simon, man. Ashraf Simon.
I didn't tell you, tell the man.
I tell the man.
Darwin, you have to tell Darwin. Great. I don't know break out thing. You have to tell Darwin.
Brong, man. Bandilegs, man.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashraf.
And
appreciate
yes,
that.
Man. And Darwin, I am very, very proud of you, my boy. As a little boy from grammar school under 15 cricket to what I am hearing now, I am very proud of you, my boy. And especially at a time like now when our country is in a mourning state. You know, we're mourning so many great people that pass and probably didn't get the respect they deserve to get. And people don't know the struggle they're going through. But listening to you tonight, my friend, I feel proud. And I want to see what that made you strong was, like you say, home thing when I listen to your home thing, and then the people around you, and you, in all my life of umpiring, with you as a young boy, you were a very humble, respectful, and you wasn't boastful and show off. You maintain a self-discipline that brought you to where you are. And those is not no God, you see, truth and reality have a way of rewarding and teaching. And if some of us, we make a lot of mistakes in our life, but if we're not humble enough to stand up when we fall, then we'll achieve nothing. I'm proud of you, and I want to say I'm hoping, and I like to end like that, especially when Cecil and Brent there. In the reset we're talking about, it's like, I hope it is not John crying out in the wilderness. Thank you and good night.
Thank you very much. And that one, I decided to because there are a number of persons who are calling in, but I wanted you to stay very focused on the subject matter that we were here to discuss. I just want to apologize to some of the persons who called in. But I just got a WhatsApp message, Darwin, and the person said, powerful discussion on the subject of maritime transportation and the future eye and solution to not only save the disappearance of our major shipping lines, but a solution through the integration of Caribbean communities that will lead to greater economical gains and benefits to our shores. I greatly support the idea. Good stuff, bro. Another caller on the line again, Darwin. Sorry about that, but we have to take the call. But I need to give you an answer in reference to what we asked earlier on. Good evening to you, caller. Good evening.
Yeah. Good evening. Great program. But I have one question to ask Mr. Telemaque. Earlier, he said that it wouldn't be wise for other islands like in the OECS to construct bigger ports. It wouldn't be profitable. If I'm not saying the right thing, you could correct me. But in one of his statements, he said that, well, in listening to him, Antigua construct a bigger port, and he thinks Antigua should be the main hub, which is not a bad idea. So, but he even said that Antigua lost like 4 ships coming to Antigua, Dominica lost 4 ships. So it wouldn't be wise for this other island like Dominica to construct bigger ports. It wouldn't be profitable. So why Antigua go ahead in constructing a bigger port? That's my question to him.
Yes, and it's a fair question. I think the idea is not that you can't construct a port. Yeah, of course you can. We should. I think Woodbridge Bay is in need of a total makeover. We should have improved what we have there. My position is we should be strategic in how we do that. In other words, when you are building within a region, okay, you don't have another Rotterdam anywhere in Europe. You don't have another Singapore anywhere in that Asia area. You don't have another Panama Canal. You don't have another Cartagena or Kingston. There are areas that are set up to be that, right? The others are constructed within the framework of what is serving them. So what has happened in aviation is everyone has tried now to get similar to what they see. So you can get your people directly in from London. I want to get my people directly in from London. You can get your container directly in from Miami. I want to get my container directly from Miami. And I'm saying that for a region, it doesn't work. So what I'm speaking of is more around using economy of scale to our benefit rather than to creating greater scale for less capacity that now exists. So the idea around what we did in Antigua was, I don't know if you remember the news, but there was an area of the port that was literally falling into the sea. It was dropping. We had to evacuate from there and move off the port because it was unsafe. The seawall was falling in, so we had to build a port. So so it was not an aesthetic move. And in hindsight, I think it could have been even better planned out from a regional perspective than the singular approach that was utilized. But having built it and having done that, because that started years and years ago, we're now saying, hey, let's take a look at what we have. There's nothing wrong in how we strategically redesign what we do at Woodbridge Bay, at Castries, at Basse-Terre, at Charlestown, at Plymouth. It's okay for us to do that, but we do that within the context of maybe we're not going to use cranes. Maybe we're going to do rural traffic, or we're going to have ships with cranes that can discharge. But those will be for us to do so that we don't end up having more and more pressure placed on us.
Someone also sent me a message. The person said, and personal gain is from St. Lucia. The business I work for pay over $10,000 for a container from China to St. Lucia. If the hub in Antigua was existing, it would cost us half the amount to get the goods to St. Lucia and pass on the benefits to the consumer. And for food, this is so critical today. This is why governments are scrapping their heads how to assist in food cost reduction.
Yes. Well, I would tell that person in St. Lucia, help is on the way. The cost from China has dropped. So on your next container, you will not be paying $10,000 because that price has gone down drastically. So you will see prices of $1,500, $1,200 coming back. But to get it from the hub to you might be a few extra $1,000, but it won't be 10. So you will see some adjustment on that within maybe your next order that you place.
We were talking earlier on, and we coming on to the end about Panama.
Yes, I was saying that our Prime Minister led the way with this, and we negotiated with Panama the opportunity to have the staff of the Antigua Port Authority fly we would choose specific numbers of people in various disciplines, and we would send them to Panama for up 3 to 5 months at a time to be trained in specific areas relating to maritime support, port operation support, port administration, port security, and equipment operating and the likes, as well as logistics and warehouse services. So all of these things are things that we have exposure to. We have exposure to various types of technology that they're using, information transfer, vessel and traffic management. All of these, the Panamanians are prepared to take some of our people, sit them with them and train them how to do that on a first world level. If you notice when I started off, I spoke of human resource capacity as something that's crucial and critical for us to do. And so in addressing Antigua's needs, we found a space that was willing and ready to do that. And that space just happened to be the best location in the Western Hemisphere to do training in port operations, logistics, and other services at our port. So I'm grateful that the Panamanians have agreed to do that. In addition to us going to Panama, they've also agreed to have some experts, operators from their country, come to spend a similar amount of time with us to help build the capacity in Antigua to create that environment that would be able to serve us and serve our neighbors around us. After we would have done that, as the chairman of the Port Management Association of the Caribbean, I re-engaged them in asking whether or not we could consider offering this support to all the ports in the Caribbean. And I'm happy to report tonight that the Panamanian government has agreed to sign a memorandum of agreement in Antigua at that June meeting that I mentioned, where with that memorandum of agreement through the Port Management Association of the Caribbean, all our member ports, which Dominica is one as well, will now be able to have our citizens fly to Panama and be trained in those same disciplines to come back home to create that dynamism that we in the region needs to have. The industry is evolving. We do not have that international best practice exposure that can help move our people up. And this is going to afford us to have that. So we get a shot in the arm from the best operating port in the Western Hemisphere. And I want to thank them for availing us of that opportunity. So come June, it will be a big day when we sign that agreement, because that will extend to all 21 PMAC port members. And I think that would be a significant step in building the best outcome for our people.
Well, I can guarantee you, Darwin, as we come to the end, that it will not be our only conversation. I need to speak to you on the issue of cruise tourism. And I also need to speak to you about the PMAC meeting that's going to be coming up in June, where you said that Dominica is invited, so that the rest of Dominica can have an understanding as to where we move forward in the region. I really want to say thank you to you, Darwin. I'm sure that the people of Wesley, Marigot, Woodford, that belt here would feel so very proud of the things that you have been doing in the changing Caribbean, and by extension, I'm sure the changing world, because what you have said there I'm sure some other CEOs of other parts of the world, if hearing what you're saying, they too would want to come on board to see how the changing world can actually affect the pockets of the ordinary people.
Well, thank you, Cecil. I like to end by saying, and I mean, we've gone for a while, my goodness. Well, we should start earlier next time, Cecil.
Yes,
anyway,
we only started at 9 o'clock because of the church service that we had, or else we would have started earlier.
Okay, so I would like to say a special thank you to you and to you too, Mr. Brain, for the opportunity to share with my hometown and my home people. I want to thank those listeners who called in and messaged in for your time. I see my brother-in-law, Banker Robin, is waving at me. I want to thank you for listening with my sister Carol. You guys are good support, and I thank you. My family's listening, my mom in Georgia, my brothers everywhere. Thank you all for listening. I also want to say that at the end of the day, transport is like the blood moving through our vein. If we don't have it, we will starve. We don't have roads that connect us. We don't have bridges that connect us. We have water, so we need transport. And as much as we need transport, ports receive ships. Our ports, therefore, are critical spaces. We should take a look at them. We should take at how we structure them. We should take at how they impact on us. I can be radical enough in saying that we should take a strong legislative look as to how we design what we permit at this critical, essential service. There are countries that have multiple ports. Some of those ports are heavily unionized, some are not. In our region, because we have single domestic spaces, one space that facilitates accessing medicine, goods, and all supplies that we have. Those spaces should be protected by the appropriate legislative arrangements, making the ports essential services so that they're not easily stopped from providing services to the public. They should be guarded heavily. We should ensure that the channel that enters into our landing spaces are designated national security zones where we prohibit certain activities from encumbering those spaces. We should adopt appropriate legislation that guides how we manage our ports before hurricanes by removing vessels that are anchored in our harbors that can compromise our channels. We should ensure that these spaces we can't say they're sacred, but to the extent that they keep us fed and keep us sustained, they should be capably equipped, the right equipment, with the right personnel, and as they do, they will serve us. And I want to thank you and thank your listeners, and hope that Dominica Port, Antigua Port, and all the other ones can continue working together, because we don't serve containers. We serve people, those who work for us and those we feed. Thank you, Cecil.
But before you say thank you and you go, someone just sent me another WhatsApp to say informative program. I was part of Maritime Meeting International Panama a few years ago when this discussion began. I am proud to see how Mr. Darwin Telemaque have developed this initiative since approximately 80% of goods are done via the sea. Another person complimenting you. Your last words, Brain.
Well, let me just, not my last word, but I would like him to hear this. Don't go yet, Darwin. What doth the poor man's son inherit? Stout muscles and a sinew heart, a steady frame, a harder spirit. King of two hands, he does his part. In every useful toil and art, a heritage it seems to me, a knight might wish to hold in fee. I leave that for you, a man of literature. Ponder upon it.
And he is a man of literature.
Thank you, Mr. Brain. I see Keith there. Keith, good night. Thank you for the shout out. I appreciate that. And everyone else who's listened. I think that This was a good engagement. And Cecil, we welcome DBS to be part of our PMAC meeting so we can filter in a lot of interesting discussions around where we're going with the Caribbean. Our theme is the Caribbean ports as a crossroad. And as we design and discuss those, we would like you to be, I'm hoping, maybe you can't do all of it, but to the extent where you can, it would be nice to broadcast some of the discussions we're going to be having. It is exciting. It's going to be something that I believe will ultimately lead to further transformation in our space.
You can guarantee yourself that, Darwin, that DBS will be on top of this action. Another person just sent a message quickly, and when the many ships or many shipping lines were coming to the Caribbean, for example, Dominica, on a weekly basis, both the stevedores, longshores, and others were employed at the time of their calling. Will the work schedule be the same in terms of daily and weekly employment?
Yep, and here's what I would say to that. The challenge for the ports is that we may actually, if there are less, let me see how I can break it down in a very simple way. If you have ships calling you 5 days a week, in other words, you have 5 ships, one on every day, then there is something for the stevedores and the longshoremen to do every single day. However, with the industry facing what it has faced with COVID, in the impact of an inflationary environment that's just wreaking a supply chain challenge that's wreaking havoc in the maritime and port sector, we have seen some ships disappear. So there are less calls to our ports, and that's how labor is created at ports. So what we should be looking at is how do we now the volume of cargo may not change. So remember what I said earlier, the port's revenue is based on container cost or tonnage, whichever one. And if that doesn't change, then to some extent, the port revenue might be the same. What would be different though, is they may have additional expenses as you do not have the continuous usage of the equipment that generates revenue and some of the man hours that will now not be used all through the week. So there's some pressure created. So we as port directors and managers will now have to look at how do we reshape our ports and move away from the traditional business that we do to add capacity to some additional things. And so some of the things that I would probably suggest we look at is how do we design our logistics operations around our port, facilitating the more integration into our spaces by the private sector to get them more engaged at our ports, and in that way creating greater efficiencies and having some of our people at our ports now interacting with those businesses for gainful employment and engagement. So we have to look at ways to ensure that we do not have a negative impact on labor at all, because that's not one of the things that we would be propagating. We're not saying that we want to have less people employed, but we also have to try to ensure that we do all we can to ensure that the broader picture is maintained, because ports, like I said, do not just serve the people at the port, they are in place to serve the owners, who are the population, all the people of the country. And that is the big picture that we have to deliver on.
Thank you very much. God works in mysterious ways with Mr. Telemaque. There are hurdles set before him, and with the hurdles, he will find solutions, which is good. Bravo, bravo, Mr. Telemaque. That's what someone just sent to me to tell you. Mr. Telemaque, Darwin, my brother, my friend, my buddy, thank you so very much for such an interactive discussion and program. And I'm sure that many people who would have listened to this program, who would have learned much more than they knew before this program. Some of the words that were being mentioned in reference to the negativity about Dominica sport, it is now been said that it's not just Dominica, but it's a regional problem, and we all have to work together to ensure that it's been solved. Thank you again, Darwin. Thank you again. Until sometime again, when we decide to speak on cruise tourism and the PMAC conference that you're going to be having in June.
Thank you, Cecil.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
All right, have a good evening yourself. Well, we just from speaking to Darwin Telemaque in Antigua there. We spoke via the social media, and it was so